Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Mariela and I have with me Chuck Mills. We're gonna go over Lobby Day, May 3rd. Sorry for the background noise. We're gonna go over Lobby Day, May 2nd. Sorry about that. So this is gonna be a quick 30-minute webinar. So this is the agenda for the webinar. We're going to talk about being an advocate, what we're advocating for, why we're advocating for it, how we're advocating for it, Supporting materials, if you look at handouts, there should be 5 handouts that you should be able to download, and we're going to go over logistics of the day. And yes, you do have homework. Questions will be answered at the end of the day, at the end of the webinar.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday morning. We're going to make this pretty quick. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think the first thing that we want to do is just briefly go over what it means to be an advocate at the local level. For us in California Relief, we focus on existing legislation, look at the history of public policy funding for our specific interests, and tie it back to state measures and reports that are advancing our goals, whether that means a report like Safeguarding California or something like the Forest Improvement Plan. But at the local level, what it really comes down to is relating back to the member that you're meeting with, what's in it for their district. How is the funding, how is the work you're doing affecting their district? They're there to represent their district in the best way possible, and that's what they want to know is what is happening with your organization that is having a positive impact in their district. So in the case of urban forestry and green infrastructure, you're going to want to relate back to them in very much a kind of a conversational way what you're doing in the district. And, we may have up to 15, 20 minutes with a member going into lobby day, or more likely a staffer that will be very attentive. You are a constituent, or you're going to be from around that region, so they are going to want to know what's happening. So taking the time to let them know what's happening in the district, and then providing a synopsis of the district needs. A lot of organizations that are going to be participating in lobby day are coming from underserved areas where tree canopy is, or lack thereof, is tied to some serious health issues, to air quality issues. So letting the member know how what you're doing is providing a better, stronger, healthier green infrastructure for the district. And then something we're going to spend a lot of time on over the course of the next 20 minutes and during lobby day as well is sharing success stories. And we've got some examples on that, but this is the kind of thing that the storytelling and the whole idea that, a picture tells 1,000 words really makes an impact here. So having those success stories ready and available of what you're doing in urban forestry, especially how it relates back to state funding sources like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which will be a focal point of our advocacy. And then finally, something that is kind of unusual but is really important is giving credit away. And a good example would be is that if you put together a huge event and you and your partners did all the work for it, and you had a lot of success and had turnout from 100 volunteers and community members from across the city that you're representing came out, and the assembly member or senator was there and gave a 3-minute presentation, you're letting the assembly member or senator know that that was a success because of them, and that it's their leadership and their influence and their ability to generate and motivate the district that is what made that event such a success. So giving away credit, thanking them for their leadership, that is how we secure their votes in the asks that we'll be discussing going forward on May 2nd, which brings us to our next slide. What are we advocating for? This year, it's pretty straightforward. We're advocating for money. Last year, we received $20 million for the urban forestry program, another $26 million for urban greening. A new program came online from State Coastal Conservancy that we think is going to have a potentially positive impact for urban forestry. And all of those programs are at risk. So we have partnered with several state environmental national resources organizations, such as Nature Conservancy and Defenders of Wildlife in Audubon, California, to put forward a $400 million ask for natural resources in this year's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is being championed by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia out of Coachella Valley and is supported by 30% of the Assembly Democratic Caucus. And as you know, if you signed on to our letter, which will be further along in this program, 125 organizations are supporting that request by the Assembly. So this is going to be the significant focal point for our lobby day, is ensuring that we have urban forestry funding, other green infrastructure funding available to us in cap and trade to continue the success that we've already had to date with the $59 million that has been allocated to CAL FIRE for urban forestry. Another element of our ask, though, is combating invasive pests. This is something that we've been working on with various partners for the last couple of years. And again, I've got to give credit to Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher for stepping up to the plate on this issue. Last year, she carried our successful AB 1530, which augmented the Urban Forestry Act. She was also a key element responsible for getting the $20 million for the Urban Forestry Program in the state budget. This year, she's taking on combating invasive pests. She's got a bill out there, AB 2054, that we won't spend a lot of time on at Lobby Day. But with that, she has attached to it a funding request of $5 million for combating invasive pests. Her letter supporting this request is attached in the materials that Mariela referenced a few minutes ago. And I think what we'll want to make sure we're doing is talking about the need to integrate CAL FIRE into this solution and into the equation on how we combat pests. This was a focal point of the bill that we passed last year, AB 1530, and we want to ensure that they're bringing their expertise and knowledge of urban forests to the table along with CDFA and others when we're talking about how to combat invasive pests. So a fairly small ask, $5 million from the general fund that we hope will go forward in the budget coming up in June and July. A larger ask of $400 million for all natural resources, and this probably will carry out into the summer given the history of how the cap and trade expenditure plan has gone to date. So I think the next question is why we're advocating for these funds. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Much to our disappointment, the governor's budget includes zero for these resources. In the past, he's included actually up to $36 million for urban and community forestry. In that particular year, unfortunately, natural resources and most programs in cap and trade received zero. But he has also advocated for significant funds for urban forestry that have come to fruition. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, it's become a bit of a political football. Natural Resources has. The governor made some deals to get the required votes to pass the cap and trade extension bill last year. And as a consequence, that's sucking a lot of oxygen out of the room regarding expenditures for priorities such as natural resources, with instead significant dollars going to industrial agriculture, which may or may not have its merits, but it certainly isn't advancing our objective in the world of urban forestry. So this is a talking point that we're going to want to focus on, is that the governor is zeroing out investments in urban forestry, urban greening, all natural resources except forest health in his cap and trade expenditure plan. And of course, the sad thing about this is that natural resources are the only investment out of everything that sequesters carbon. We have a dual benefit of reducing greenhouse gases through energy conservation measures, obviously through and co-benefits that come with it, but we're the only investment that sequesters carbon. So it really is disappointing to see this not included in the expenditure plan, especially when you take into consideration that the Legislative Analyst's Office has said that investments in natural resources fall outside the cap sector. And what that means is that everything that we're bringing to the table is additional. It's additionality in terms of sequestration, co-benefits that were not in transportation, were not in agriculture, and consequently, our investments are above and beyond what the cap sector is bringing into the equation because, of course, if they're receiving greenhouse gas reduction funds, they're also creating emissions that are then being offset, whereas all we're doing is offsetting from the beginning. As everyone knows, these programs are oversubscribed. The two that I've highlighted here, you can see on the chart, urban forestry and urban greening, both oversubscribed by about 400%, but you can see that they still receive some funding over the years, but not nearly enough to address the problem in a more meaningful way. And though the greenhouse gas reductions, especially for the urban forestry program, are tremendous in terms of bang for the buck. So that's a focal point. All of these are pieces that we're going to want to raise on Lobby Day as to why we're advocating for these fundings from the greenhouse gas reduction pot. And then finally, in relation to the invasive pests, we all know that the shot hole borer and other invasives are really taking their toll on our existing urban forests in the south, with tens of thousands of trees already being lost solely to the prolific shot hole borer. And we know this is moving north quickly, so the time has actually passed for addressing this. But again, we have to give credit to Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, who's trying to address this head on by starting us down the road to investment by putting in that $5 million request, which will hopefully lead to sustained funding over the course of several years. But everyone has stories to tell on how pests and disease are creating challenges in their urban forest plantings, and especially in their continued growth and maintenance of the mature trees. So with that, I think we're going to move on to how we're advocating, and I think we're going to turn it back over to Mariella.
So how we're advocating, we are going to need some materials from you when you come here to the Capitol. We want you to kind of write a one-pager of some GGRF, the best GGRF projects in your district, double-sided, of course. And please include pictures. Pictures, like Chuck said, tells 1,000 words. And then include some statistics: trees, number of trees planted, how much the project costs, funding, number of community members engaged, number of events. And if you have a member attend one of your events, include that. Include pictures of him speaking at the event or planting a tree. That's very important. And if he said something during the event that relates to the benefits of trees or the community aspect of urban forestry, include a quote of that in your one pager. And if you have any questions about this one pager, please ask us. And like Chuck said earlier, give credit to the member. Like without the member being at the event, there wouldn't be such a large turnout. Thank you for advocating for urban forestry in the Capitol. Like those kinds of quotes to include. And then right here, it's included in your handout. It's an example of how to tell a story, so you could go through it. This is a story from KYCC written by the Green Lining Institute to help them advocate for urban forestry and the urban greening program. So please take a look at that as an example. In addition.
Yeah, so another example coming out of the Bay Area would be Oakland Relief or Urban Relief. This is another example that appears in a Green Lining Institute document. And one of the things as you're looking at the examples is to really notice how absolutely there's discussion about the trees and about the urban forest, but it's also a comment or a commentary on the state of the region or the city in which these trees are being planted, the community members that are engaged. You can see that's reflected in the pictures. And that it is actually telling a story. There's the project description, but then there's really learning more about the district and the benefits that this project is providing, and kind of weaving a fabric around urban forestry in a way that reflects the level of community participation and engagement and volunteerism, as well as the leadership of the organization driving the train to make these projects happen. So just something to take in consideration. Obviously, we realize time is short. We're only a couple weeks away from the lobby day, but putting together a double-sided one-pager with a couple of good pictures, a couple of good quotes, and a synopsis of what you consider to be your best story from the CAL FIRE GGRF program would be great. So one of the things that was in the supporting materials was a handout relating to talking points that we're going to use on lobby day. A lot of them we've already gone over, and all of these I expanded on a bit more in detail in the handout that was included in the supporting materials document. So just quickly, we're going to go through this, and then you can read it more on your own. But this is essentially the skeleton or the outline of what we'll be discussing with the legislators. Is certainly providing thanks for their leadership. Certainly last year, the governor was not our point person on natural resources. It was primarily the Assembly that really pushed to get funding available to urban forestry and urban greening and other natural resources in the final cap and trade expenditure plan. And we need to acknowledge that there are a lot of staff and a lot of members that are really working hard to make sure that we're getting our small portion of cap and trade funds for these purposes. We've already talked about giving credit away. We've already talked about what the ask is going to be and how the urban forestry funds have benefited the district. One of the things that you might want to touch on is describe upcoming urban forestry opportunities. Recently, CAL FIRE announced the organizations that they're inviting back to compete for a full proposal. If you were invited back, mention that and describe what that project would look like in their district. Or if you've got one that is currently moving forward that hasn't been captured yet, then describe what that project's going to look like and make sure to invite the member to be participatory in that. Again, we've talked about the governor's budget not providing for these funds, which is the motivation by us coming together with a larger ask for natural resources. And then again, $5 million for pests and disease. LGF is short for Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, describing how the invests are impacting your work. And then, we're going to have maybe up to 15, 20 minutes with each member or member staff to go over these materials. We're going to break groups into clusters relating to what region you're from. So we'll have a Bay Area constituency, a Los Angeles constituency, Central Valley, Central Coast, Sacramento Valley. So we want to leave time for everyone to be able to speak a little bit about what they're doing, especially if you're the member that is in that, or if you're the organization that's in that member's district. But at the end, we want to allow for a window for follow-up, and that can be a way to close out the meeting in a very congenial way, an invitation to a planning event. If there's another district event involving urban forestry or your organization, including them in that, or just even following at the district level, exchange of business cards. But it's a good way to just kind of close out the meeting in a very friendly way that keeps a window open for building a relationship. Because I think what we've learned over the past couple of years in particular is that the relationship building at the Capitol and in the district is what's essential for our issue area for urban forestry. We are competing with a lot of voices that are more powerful, that are more influential than us, but we have this network of groups doing work in the various cities throughout California that are making a dramatic impact, and those are the voices that the members are being heard. So if you have a relationship with the office already, this is a chance to augment it. And if this is your first time speaking with the staff or the office, this is an opportunity to start that relationship. So creating that window for follow-up is really key as we move forward and trying to sustain funding for urban forestry and urban forestry policy. And then finally, a way to just close out in a very nice, amicable way is to invite them to the reception. It's from 5 to 7 o'clock that same night. We hope to see a lot of legislators and staff there. We'll be honoring Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher for her work last year and this year on urban forestry. We've got a great little invitation card that everyone will receive. So, we can hand those to all the staff and legislators as we meet with them, and as a nice little thank you for the meeting and a way to leave a good impression with them, even if the meeting didn't go that great, which in some cases that may be the case. So I think those are really the focal points that we're going to have as for the lobby day. And again, if you have any questions, you can contact Mariella or I before lobby day. And then I think we'll also have some logistics that Mariella will be going over soon. Why don't we continue?
So this is some of the supporting material that's attached to the webinar. This is a $400 million ask for GDRF for the natural resources. In it, you can see a bunch of logos. Some of you have signed up to support this. If you haven't signed up to support it, please email us immediately so we can add your logo and your contact information. But basically, this is the $400 million ask that we've been referencing. In addition,
so yeah, we have other supporting materials. I know the question that's likely to come up is why are we putting our eggs in this larger $400 million basket? And the answer is pretty straightforward, is that we are trying to get all the natural resources stakeholders on the same page this year. That's been very challenging in years past, and at least on the Assembly side, we're doing a fairly good job of that. We've heard from the members in the past that speaking one voice is what allows them to make those hard decisions on what programs they're going to fund. So we found value in working with Assemblymember Garcia's office and saying, everything was cut, so let's restore everything. And as a consequence, it's allowed partnerships between us and Defenders of Wildlife and the California Climate Agricultural Network and Audubon California to all move forward with the same voice until we can no longer do that. And if we get to that point, we still think we're going to be in fairly good shape for urban forestry and urban greening, and these supporting materials reflect why. There's really no other program other than urban forestry and urban greening that's being supported by such a diverse set of coalitions and stakeholder interests throughout California. These are 3 additional coalitions, one of which we're a participant in, that is asking for specific funding for urban forestry and urban greening. As you can see here, a lot of environmental justice groups, this is a priority for them, but also groups in affordable housing and energy conservation and active transportation are supporting urban forestry and urban greening. So in total, with the 125 groups that we have on the letter for the $400 million for natural resources, I believe there's another 20 organizations here, so almost 150 groups statewide supporting urban forestry and urban greening in the next cap and trade expenditure plan. So these will be supporting materials that you can share out as well with members when you're going to meetings and the staff to demonstrate such strong support for our programs moving forward.
So just some logistics of going over the day. In the morning, we're going to meet at 8:30 at downtown Irvine. We provide you the address, and we're going to have a small talk on any legislative updates that have gone on between now and the day of. We're going to separate into 5 different groups, like Chuck said, and then meetings are going to start from 9:30 to 3:30. At some point, we will break off for lunch break whenever it's appropriate. And then we're going to have, we're scheduling meetings right now with the staffers and the ledge member. But we will also do drop-ins to various offices. Hopefully we'll be able to meet with the appropriate staff member on natural resources for 10 to 15 minutes. And then after the 3:30, we're all going to meet up and have a breakdown of the day. Who was very receptive to our urban forestry and the pest ask, and then who wasn't too keen on the pest ask, and any concerns that a staff member raised about urban forestry or pests. And then after that, of course, we're gonna all go to the reception from 5 to 7 p.m. And this is really a chance for you to network with the staffers and the ledge members and try to strengthen that relationship so that when you go back to the district, you know who to contact and you can blossom that relationship and hopefully invite them to an event. In addition, if you weren't able to schedule a meeting or we didn't drop in for a meeting with that member and they're at the reception, that's an opportunity for you to talk about the projects that have been going on in your district related to GGRF and for you to provide them that one pager that we distributed earlier today.
Yeah, I think some of the important things to keep in mind here is that as we do talk about separating into groups, we already know that there's going to be some groups, especially Bay Area and Los Angeles, are going to have fairly full days. Those are groups of maybe 5, 6, 7 organizations that are going to be representing various assembly member and senator districts. I think some of the other groups, such as Central Coast, Central Valley, those might be shorter days. So Mariela, myself, and our contract lobbyist, Alfredo Arredondo, will be available to try to coordinate with everyone throughout the day. We'll all be at the Capitol. And then just on the break from 3:30 to 5, I know it's a long day, and folks may want to have a little downtime there. We don't want that to be a fairly intensive discussion, but what we do want to do is get a sense of how the day is framing how we're going to recap this to members that aren't participating in lobbying day when we have the retreat the next day. So we'll probably designate some lead spokespersons from each of the group to provide the takeaways from the day, and we'll try to keep it to an hour if possible, but we just want to allow for plenty of time, which is why we'll be scheduled for 90 minutes.
Next, yes, so you do have homework. Please bring that one-pager double-sided with your stories about your best GGRF project. In addition, remember to bring multiple colored copies, especially if you're meeting with more than one member in the offices, and then go over your talking points. Try to make them your own, the way you will speak, make it sound natural to you, but still giving the credit to the member and any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really the most important is that, we're trying to provide a guideline for how the day will go, but certainly you're going to want to resonate with the member how you feel is best appropriate, and you know the district better than us. And so as you look over the talking points, put them into your own words so that you'll be able to have a conversation that your member will relate to, which is often sometimes a challenge in Sacramento because we don't have the same district knowledge that you do.
So at this point, does anyone have any questions? No questions?
Okay, well, looking at the queue, we don't see any questions coming up. We're actually doing great schedule-wise. We wanted to keep this to about a half hour. I show it's about 11:26, and we did start on time. So we'll keep it open for another few seconds on questions, but then we'll close it out. Of course, Mariela and I are both available. You have our contact information up on the screen right now. You can send us an email or give us a call. And seeing no other questions, I think we're going to close it out. Anything else to add, Mariela?
No, that's it.
Thanks so much for joining us today. This will be available up on our website by later this afternoon. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye.